Nimbus III, neutral zone. A dust ball being blown around an unremarkable star. This desert lies on the thin line between Romulan and Federation space, and neither wants anything to do with it. Originally colonised as a poster world for cooperation between the Klingon, Romulan and Federation governments. Well, you can see how that idea went. This bar, the watering hole, aptly named as it's the only oasis for miles, is the place where to meet our contact. But perhaps my current state of affairs requires some clarity.
I don't want any trouble.
Thalaron weapons. Where can I find some? This story arc, known as Wasteland, chronologically takes place before episodes 15 and 16 of my story series, just before we were dispatched to investigate the Romulan experiments with Borg tech, but after their failed attack on Vulcan. Franklin Drake of Starfleet Intelligence contacts us to inform us that there have been Thalaron triggers and rumours of Tal Shiar activity on Nimbus III. He insists that us dealing with the Tal Shiar would throw a spanner into their works, strengthen our relations with the Republic, and help the people of this forgotten colony world, now under the thumb of the Orion Syndicate. Hassan the Undying spearheads Syndicate interests in the system, and our contact will be one Horace Jones. And just before we set off to this wretched hive of scum and villainy, we learn that we won't have been the first operative to attempt this mission. Great. What happened to all the others? Arriving in the Nimbus system, we're immediately greeted by the sight of a ramshackle station of various technologies. Perhaps it was once in uniform design, but numerous repair jobs and grafts of other station components has rendered the design a mismatch of various sections. This is all because the Nimbus system is all but disowned by the galactic powers that founded it. It was established in 2267 at the end of the Federation and Klingon War by the two species as a symbolic gesture of friendship and a toast to a new age of peace. The Romulans too got involved to maintain diplomatic ties and subdue the fears of a Federation-Klingon alliance. According to the records, the Federation began development in all good faith, while the Klingons used it as a dumping ground for the dishonoured and dregs of their society. The Romulans foresaw the failure of this world and likewise reduced their efforts. The Federation gave up on the idea and reduced its presence down to a representative and a couple of staff. Plans to renew the colony were set in motion around 2370, but then the Dominion War happened and all development was dropped once again. With every major power in the quadrant diverted with the Dominion, the Orion Syndicate muscled in and decided to take over. They faced little opposition, and the planet now lies all but forgotten in the grips of a criminal organisation, while every ideal it was founded for is stomped out, and this planet is the last net that catches the dregs that fall out of society. Shakedowns, muggings, poverty, illness, in every corner of paradise. At least one thing remains in this world: everyone's treated the same. The only authority is the Orion Syndicate, and at their head is Hassan the Undying. We find Horace Jones reclining against the entrance to paradise. He identifies himself as a prospector, trader and information broker. He assumes we're here for the missing travellers, or perhaps weapons. Grandson of Cyrano Jones, he seems to follow the same philosophy. Don't pick a side, and you're never on the losing team. And do business with everyone that can pay. As we talk to him, a firefight breaks out just beyond the walls, but it's none of our business, so we don't get involved. I get the feeling I'm going to have to use that excuse a lot on this planet. Straight to business then. Inquiring about the Thalaron triggers gets Jones nervous. He cites that it's common knowledge that there's some sort of Thalaron weapon system here, but the Orion Syndicate is making efforts to dissuade investigative behaviour, as it wants to obtain the weapons for itself. He points us to the bar for more information. But what's this about missing people? It could include Starfleet Intelligence's previous intelligence teams.
If you need it, I've got it. The Syndicate might be listening.
Jones puts all the disappearances down to the desert claiming its toll. There are monsters out there, the Heat and the Orion Slavers. Well, it seems plausible, but a bit too coincidental that every agent sent so far has gone missing. He again points us to the bar and its owner, a former Borg drone known as 2 of 8, for more information.
I don't want any trouble.
Thalaron weapons. Where can I find some?
We could reveal our identity as officers, if he doesn't already know, but I'm trying to keep a low profile. There's no point asking him how he came to be here. He doesn't know us, he's not our friend. But he does divulge that others have come to him for the Thalaron triggers too, and he sent them into the desert where the Orions operate. They have a rule that all trouble remain outside the walls, making Paradise something of a neutral zone. Pressing him for further details on anything is pointless.
I sell drinks here, not information.
Then there's nothing for it but to go have a poke around ourselves. This expanse is teeming with wreckage, scorpions and other strange adventurers, each involved in their own missions. The spines and scraps accompanying the skeletons of dead beasts, they make this desert truly live up to its name. We periodically have to fend off attacks by sand scorpions of various sizes. Around 20 should do it to deter the wildlife, as well as scan the remains of up to 5 piles of weapon debris. They're not hard to find, but this does feel a bit aimless. We're just here turning over rocks, looking for anything that can help. After a while of scavenging, we head out further from Paradise, but with a ship in orbit, we can beam back to the city at any time. The benefits of modern technology. But as we head further out, we detect life signs of other survivors, Klingon and Starfleet IFFs. Tarsi immediately blames their distress on 2 of 8 for sending them out into the desert on a fool's errand to fall prey to its harshness. The Klingons aren't too happy to be rescued by Starfleet, but come on, a warrior's death, dehydration and heatstroke is not. We rescue the Starfleet team too, and Tarsi suggests we confront 2 of 8 about his intel. He'd have us wandering around aimlessly out here until we died, as he no doubt did to these 2 groups. In all likelihood, he was probably just trying to brush us off and avoid trouble with the Orions. Understandable. But that doesn't mean I have to like it. Oi, Scrap Heap. He's apologetic and a bit more talkative now that we've returned in ire. How surprising. But he explains that, sure enough, the Orions have an interest in the Thalaron triggers, and he's been avoiding trouble by misleading the previous teams sent by both the Klingons and Starfleet. He even pays us a compliment by saying that we have the resources to survive the desert, so maybe we can fight the Orions. I feel like he's completely serving his own interests here. He can tell that Starfleet isn't going to stop pursuing this, and activity on Nimbus III is only growing. He spills the beans. The Thalaron triggers are in the possession of the Orions, and he tells us that we can find help here from a man named Law. On the way to the reclusive Law's house, a torn menu reminds me that this was supposed to be a thriving place of commerce, and we do pass some stalls of trade, but produce shipped in is likely subject to the Orion Syndicate's protection taxes, and they often get first pickings of goods.
Not everyone can stand up to the Syndicate.
We contact Law using an encrypted signal and are met with the grizzled face of an aging Romulan, scarred, thin-lipped and narrow-eyed. He name-drops his time as a peacekeeper, as a threat maybe, and tells us to get lost. We can ask him who the peacekeepers were, and he grudgingly tells us. The peacekeepers were a civilian organisation from Nimbus III who decided to become the marshals of the town and uphold the law. The Orion Syndicate didn't like that and took down the group, dragging Law through the streets while the native Nimbosians did nothing to help. He gave up on the peacekeepers soon after. We tell him we're trying to track down some Thalaron triggers, and he must see something in us, perhaps the toll the desert has taken, because he offers help if we keep him safe. We promise to do so, but he still seems reluctant, stating that the Orion Syndicate is receiving aid from the Tal Shiar. So the rumours were almost true, that the Tal Shiar and the Orion Syndicate weren't in competition, that they'd in fact worked out a deal. He mentions a series of old ruins to the north that the Orion Muscle, Nausicaans and Gorn, used as a base of operations, but an infestation of sandworms moved in and the Syndicate recently abandoned it. Perhaps there are some records left we can find to shed some light on this deal, the location of the Romulans, the Syndicate, or the Triggers. Once more we set off into the scorching sands of the deserts surrounding Paradise, and we crest a large dune where we spot the ruins Thror spoke of. Along its outskirts we can see these flailing tendrils from the sand twisting and writhing. Each marks the location of a burrowed sandworm, or as they're called, Hale worms, from the Romulan word for ghost. This alludes to their nature of erupting from the ground and seemingly coming out of nowhere. Weapons drawn, we enter the ruins. We can try to avoid conflict with the worms as much as possible, but we will have to drive some away to reach our objectives. Fortunately, this adds to our total reconnaissance for the area. But the easiest way is to locate abandoned computer stations and search them for the records. The stations can be found within the open faces of what remains of the buildings, and interacting with them allows for a substantial progression of our objective meter. We do have to be cautious though, lingering too long here may summon the attention of a greater threat, the Hale Queen, a monument of a worm that, like her smaller kin, can spit acid and thrash about with razor-sharp talons at her mouth. After a drawn-out battle, the Queen is defeated and we are able to return to the task at hand, with the aid of some passing-by adventurers. Near to the site of the battle there is a power cable tied back to a generator. This small camp is still running, with even a transporter pad that we can add our profile to. This allows for quick travel between here and the town of Paradise. This all suggests that this camp has indeed only been recently vacated by the Syndicate. The sandworms have yet to wreck it, and the power cables running all around the ruins have mostly yet to be disturbed. After we finish scouting the area, Temet notes that the data is encrypted, but we can probably make use of the computer back in the watering hole to decrypt it. What is... Gay? It's looking at me. Okay, just a giant tardigrade. Why not? Let's just go and decrypt this information. The decryption process is a fairly simple puzzle where we have to create a sequence of numbers where the first 2 digits add up to the third, and the 2 and the 3 add up to the fourth, with the fourth number being stuck at 20 and the second stuck at 5. So the answer is 10, 5, 15, 20. 10 plus 5, 15, 5 plus 15, 20. Simple enough. Upon completion we receive the cryptic message, "The blind man sees all." Jones contacts us and offers his assistance once again, this time earnestly saying that perhaps we can overthrow the Syndicate, and maybe beginning to believe we are here to help. He tells us he can find out who the blind man is, or at least he can help us find out. He decides that if we can win over the populace of Paradise, then perhaps we can receive help in our investigation.
If you need it,
Sorry, the comms went out. We talk to 2 of 8 again to see how we can assist the people, and he asks for a replicator. Well, there's no violation of the Prime Directive here. Technically Nimbus III is 1/3 Federation colony, so sure, why not? We have to assign a technician from the Armiger to help out, but that's enough to learn that a good show of Starfleet authority might be enough to turn heads. Well, the previous operatives sent here by Starfleet Intelligence all ended up quietly disappearing and being misled into the deserts. So perhaps the quiet approach isn't going to help us anymore. After all, fishing around for information has got us nowhere so far. The Nimbosians are a cagey lot who don't ask too many questions for fear of the Syndicate. It's time to make some noise and flex our muscles a bit, show them that Starfleet has returned and that we have the biggest stick now. I'm a little dubious that the people won't simply shun any show of authority, but they are also desperate, and to the desperate, hope is sometimes all that is needed. We beam in security teams to patrol Nimbus III, making no secret of Starfleet's presence here, sending a message to the Orion Syndicate that the town has a new sheriff, and this one is capable of orbital bombardment. The people seem to be responding favourably to the presence of official uniformed soldiers. I guess word is beginning to spread that we're here to overthrow the Orion Syndicate. I feel a little uncomfortable though. Our mission here was to recover some illegal weapons, not save these people. We aren't here to play hero, but that's clearly not what the rumour mill is churning out. After the patrols in the streets, we engage in some one-on-one rallying of morale amid the people, encouraging them to aid us against the Orions. Am I making promises we can't keep? We cap everything off with a round on the house, credit the bill to Franklin Drake, and then Scavenging reports that Law has requested to meet us. Are we being followed? Our open push for Starfleet has certainly reinforced the rumours that we're here to right all of the wrongs of Paradise. Law then drops a bombshell. He is an Orion Syndicate informant, a spy known as the Blind Man. He's been working for Hassan since his time as a peacekeeper ended. Why would he betray his people? He wanted to be the lawmaker, didn't he? He sighs and tells us he ended up here after Romulus was destroyed and thought in typical Romulan arrogance that he could instill order on a lesser civilization as only a Romulan could. When the Syndicate came for him, no one lifted a finger to help him, and after they beat him and humiliated him, he agreed to become their informant, the Blind Man. They could use his reputation as an opponent of the Syndicate to root out more potential troublemakers, and no one would suspect Law, the peacekeeper, to have switched his allegiance to the Orions. He never told us because, well, understandably, he has trust issues. We say that as a member of Starfleet, we could have helped, and he responds with a surprisingly valid rebuke. It's more than the Nimbosians feeling abandoned by the powers that founded the colony. Law himself has literally had a first-hand experience of Starfleet personnel arriving, promising to help, then accepting an Orion bribe and leaving. I expect Law's taskmasters weren't best pleased with his attempts to sell them out. In fact, it was this incident that led the Orions to come knocking at his door and ended his tenure as a peacekeeper. We grab the name of the officer who did this, 1 Havison, and we promise to chase it up. In the meantime, excuses aside, Law tells us all he knows about the location of the Thalaron triggers, located deep in the Syndicate stronghold. The downed ship that lies scattered across the mountain range to the northeast of here acts as the base of operations for Hassan. The narrow mountain paths guarded by pirates and mercenaries that he's hired, and we learn that a number of the disappearances around town have been due to the Orion slave trade. We learn that his base doubles as a prison before they're shipped off-world to the Orion slave markets. Ending the call, we can then contact Havison himself to ask about his actions. He answers, a captain now with his own command. Technically, he outranks Commander Hale here, but nonetheless he doesn't hide from his actions, telling us that he was a lieutenant at the time and unprepared to fight the Orions. He accepted a bribe, took a share of the contraband he'd been sent to confiscate, so his mission looked successful and returns to Starfleet with a job seemingly well done. He says it still haunts him, that he feels guilty for betraying the uniform. Well, apparently not guilty enough to turn down a promotion to captain though. We have the option to keep quiet about the whole incident, but then aren't we turning a blind eye too, playing hypocrite and breaking our promise to Law? Law, who himself isn't that clean anyway, but... look, we weren't there, we can't know the situation in its entirety. His life could have been in danger, but then why didn't Havison just accept the bribe, play along, and then turn over everything he had on the Orion Syndicate to command? If things were truly bad enough that his life was in danger, Starfleet would understand, then they could respond with a more appropriate task force. I was not prepared for a moral dilemma like this. I'm already dealing with something else here. When in doubt, protocol says report him. Admiral Quinn immediately gets in contact with us and says he's going to have words with Havison. We close the channel and continue with our mission. Oh, that whole affair felt dirty. We fight our way up the mountainside, and sure enough the passages are guarded by Gorn pirates and Nausicaan bandits. As we reach the summit of sorts, where the wreck of the ship lies dashed against the stone, the wind whistles through the structure, creating a cacophony of harsh air. From our vantage point in the sand-blasted scraps of this once space-worthy debris, we can see the illuminated force fields of slave pens spanning up below us. Alright then, I guess our mission parameters just changed. We're going to have to free these captives too. I guess we are here to right the wrongs of the Syndicate. We fight our way into the valley. We can minimise our encounters here, but it's difficult to avoid every patrol, though there is also a mission, the Orion's Path, that rewards us for taking out the Nausicaan Guardian. Travelling down the rusted tones of a damaged corridor, the light filters down through the open walls, and soon it opens up onto the pens that we saw from our prior vantage. Fortunately, it seems we've arrived in the middle of an inspection of sorts, as each bay has its shields open a fraction, and contains several guards interrogating their captives. We waste no time storming the cells, the Ravagers, Pillagers and Bandits putting up a struggle. They say they'll just round up more slaves. Well, we'll see about that. We evacuate the 4 occupied pens, and then the last man to beam out tells us that Hassan sends people who can't pay to the slavers, or he uses them for entertainment at his stronghold. As he's beamed away, we're attacked by the prison warden, a giant Nausicaan with a powerful rifle that produces a painful knockback when it catches us. With sustained fire, the brute falls, and we leave to put a stop to Hassan the Undying. His final sanctuary lies at the top of this rise, under a twisted dome of metal, wrought from the debris of the crashed vessel. A giant fan circulates against the hot air of the desert, providing some limited relief from the scorching heat. We can see that the outward barricades of scrap are manned by more pirates, so a quick sprint across the open ground may be our only way in. We rush the gate, and it doesn't take long before we're fired upon. The guards above the entrance we've just come through have a good shot at our backs, and if it wasn't for the portable shields, we'd be in a lot more trouble. These will be our first targets, as they currently present the threat of being surrounded. With the guards dealt with, one of which is a much tougher Orion pirate captain, we rush across the courtyard to investigate some corpses. These individuals seem to have fallen prey to Hassan's soldiers, and if I had to guess, perhaps they were unruly slaves or belligerent patrons of his establishment. Speaking of which, we approach a closed-off door to an intact section of the crashed ship. Hassan lies sealed beyond it, and a neon sign reads Chengdu. As we approach, the Armiger relays a message to us from Admiral Quinn, and the signal is very weak. Perhaps this place is shielded from comms to an extent. Quinn wanted to relay the fact that Captain Harrison will not be punished for his actions, at least not too much. I wonder if things would have been a bit more different if we were not at war. As it is, we need every captain. We check in with Horace Jones, who confirms that Chengdu is effectively a den of criminal activity, and that we're going to need to strong-arm Hassan the Undying into giving us the location of the Thalaron triggers. Before we enter, under the stairs there's another transporter which we can add our signature to, allowing us to beam back here at a moment's notice. There's a queue to get in. I'm surprised at the air of order there is in here. With the firefight we caused outside, I'd expect a bit more of a panic, but I guess these are hardened pirates and criminals here, slavers and such. They're probably used to the rough lifestyle. Posters advertise a Captain Fang, and monitors line the entrance hall showing what looks like a stadium. The door to the left is closed, so we'll talk to the bouncer. He mentions the disturbance outside, and we respond with, "You want us to cause a disturbance in here?" With that, he lets us in. Chengdu is a lavish establishment, while at the same time being dark and industrial in appearance. The atmosphere is rife with a heady cocktail of discussion, green and pink neon lights and smoke. The pounding music provides a deep pulse to the club, and in the centre, showgirls and guys dance for the entertainment of the crowds, while a four-sided monitor hanging from the middle shows the same hangar-like stadium we saw outside. With the bass so loud, it's of little surprise that there's no signs of panic in here. I doubt they could hear anything going on outside. Walking around to the north side of the room, we see that very stadium walled off by a cage. Peeking inside between the bars, we can see 4 combatants fighting it out with blade and rifle. And suddenly the monitors make sense. It's a fight pit. The cynic in me says we're going to end up in there at some point. Hassan isn't just going to hand us the triggers. But maybe we can strike a deal. We'll have to find him first. Heading down towards the bar, we pass more posters for this Captain Fang. Perhaps he's the arena's champion. We talk to the mixologist here, but all we get is the option to have a drink. Well, maybe not now, it wouldn't do to get hammered here. Despite the atmosphere of euphoria and entertainment, we must remember we are in the middle of a hornet's nest. But I suppose I could buy a bottle of Chateau Picard for later. Well, Hassan's not here. You guys go check over there. I'm going to stay here and look for Hassan over here a bit more. And like any nightclub on the outskirts of the room, there are those shady looking individuals not mixing with the crowds but content to just watch. You know, I can't help but wonder, are these dancers voluntary or, more likely, part of Hassan the Undying's slavery ring? Well, no luck on our own. I guess we're going to have to pester the patrons. We learn from one patron that Hassan doesn't allow Orion women in, as Orion culture is predominantly matriarchal and he doesn't like his authority being challenged. He takes orders only from a Melanie Diane. He also tells us that the fighting pits are gladiatorial in nature, with combatants being people who have wronged Hassan in some way and a handful of privileged champions. As for Hassan's location, he suggests chatting to one of the guards by the cells. At the back of the establishment furthest from the entrance, we find 3 shielded cells, each with a captive. One seems very distressed at her predicament. I wish we could help. And the final cell has a man preparing himself possibly for combat in the arena. All the guard has to say is that we need to talk to a Jensen who will give us an introduction to Hassan the Undying. Hey guys, I think I found a bouncer we can take. Look at him, he's so tiny. Speaking of the bouncers, they clearly aren't here to stop fights, as one just erupts behind us. Then again, perhaps for pirates and raiders, what constitutes a fight is open for some negotiation. We find Jensen with his feet up watching the male dancers by the entrance. Jensen snidely remarks that we're fools if we think that we're here to confront Hassan, saying that we've been allowed in because Hassan has a plan for us. He's in the VIP lounge and we're free to visit him. Well, that doesn't bode well. If he's confident enough to allow an armed away team into the heart of his base after they shot their way in, he must really feel secure. Tarsi agrees, so we make our way cautiously to the VIP booth. Good job I skipped that drink. Here he is, the man of the hour.
This is my planet.
Maybe you could sell it and buy yourself a neck. We should probably just be direct here, he knows what we're after. Thalaron triggers, I want them. He tells us quite calmly that the triggers are no longer in his possession, he's sold them. But he won't give out the information on who the buyer is unless we do something useful for him. I knew it. He's spared us to have us perform some menial task for him. I bet he'd enjoy that, having Starfleet at his beck and call. Well, I was prepared to negotiate. Wait, what?
The Master of Hounds! Can he bring our new fighter to heel?
Ah, bugger, he beamed us into the arena. Spotlights overhead, cameras on us, and a pack of war goals bear down at the lashings of their taskmaster. Being savage beasts, they charge in for close attacks, biting. But they aren't too dangerous though. I'd imagine they'd make short work of someone not armed to the teeth with a Romulan disruptor and personal energy shields. Someone else must have finished off the war goal's tamer, as we're given a brief reprieve between waves to collect any drops and regroup.
From the subtropical savanna of Neural, can the Mugatu make our fighters sweat?
Ah! Mugatos are large poisonous apes, though only one here looks to be of mature age. being around 2 meters in height. The others, despite being labelled as adult, are stunted in size but just as feral. The thing is, Mugato usually travel in mated pairs and aren't pack animals, so either we're fighting a parent and its offspring, or the Mugato have been trained to fight this way for entertainment's sake.
This fierce beast is from the frontier of WASTELAND 3! Let's see if it puts our fighters in a pinch!
Ah, pinch, I get it, Scorpion. Oh shit, it's really big. Dewa is a planet settled by the Romulans, so perhaps they'd know how to deal with these creatures. They're similar enough to this planet's native sand scorpions, though much bigger. We'll treat them the same, focusing on the smaller ones first, then the adults, and then we'll leave the colossal until we've reduced their numbers. The easiest method here is to simply leave the creature around so it can't get a hook on us with those pincers, and when it's stunned, the creature recoils into a ball for a second. Except when it gets too close, then you can just punch it in the face. Once the creature flails its last, we get another brief reprieve to regroup and reassess. We move into the tunnel, protecting our flanks from any incoming fire, or at least that's the plan.
The result of this match is almost a foregone conclusion. I give you the crew of the Snapdragon!
The crew of the Snapdragon are likely a pirate ship led by the notorious Captain Fang, whom we've seen posters for dotted around. She and her crew must be the reigning champions of Chengdu's arena. The crew consists of Fang herself, Ryang the Merciless, a brute of a Gorn who can tear up the bulkheads and throw them at us, a Cardassian called Sene Labak, a Nausicaan called Kunjak, and another Gorn, Zorgan. Most drop quickly enough, and it's likely that Ryang and Fang will be the last ones standing. There, with the last Gorn down, it's time to prove who the superior crew is. Interesting bit of speculation here, but Fang's armour is apparently that of the Klingon Honor Guard.
Sometimes you need to take matters into your own hands. Now you die.
Her son enters the arena to fight as himself. But back to Fang for a minute. Along with the species of her crew, it suggests perhaps she had a prestigious history in the KDF, so how she wound up here is probably a tale to tell. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll get the option to discuss it, even though I brought some Chateau Picard earlier. The fight against Hassan himself is actually pretty easy, just be wary of soaking up too much damage from his reinforcements, as he beams out when he reaches 1/3 health. Undying indeed, he just runs away.
Whoever brings me their heads will be wealthier than the Grand Nagus!
As if not cowardly enough, he incites his patrons to attack us and try to claim our bounty. Things are about to get hectic. How many people did we pass coming in here? And now they're all hostile.